Okay, welcome back to S.P.Q.R. something. I forgot to read this last time. I was just shocked, I guess, because I was just reading about the Romulus and Remus legend. We still have to read some other legends. I think I've read this as well. I mean, it's still part of the Romulus and Remus stuff. When he started to build the well around the area of the future city, the jealous Remus leaped over the sacred furrow as a gesture of mockery and was slain by his brother in a fit of wrath. I don't know if I read that. Romulus and Remus wished to start a new settlement on the shores of the Tiber, but they could not agree who should become the ruler and give name to the new state. Finally, they decided to separate in search of a propitious omen. Romulus on the Palatine Hill and Remus on the Aventine. Remus was first to see 6 vultures, but immediately thereupon Romulus observed 12 and was proclaimed king. When he started to build the wall around the area of the future city, the jealous Remus leapt over the sacred furrow as a gesture of mockery and was slain by his brother in a fit of wrath. The rape of the Sabine woman. Among Romulus's companions, men vastly outnumbered women. Since their reputation was dubious, their Sabine neighbors thought it best to avoid them and refused to let them court their daughters and sisters, while they accepted an invitation to celebrate together the festival of the sea god Neptune. During the games, at a specific time, Romulus gave the signal for his men to attack the Sabine crowd and seize their young maidens. Sabine men attempted to resist but were overpowered and had to flee. Romulus assured the frightened women that they would enter into honorable matrimony with his men and become the mothers of a great nation. The Great Peace. The Sabine men never intended to leave this outrage unavenged. They prepared for war with the Romans. When the battle finally took place, its outcome long remained uncertain. The Sabine women, however, grew to love their husbands as they did their fathers and brothers. The cries of battle wrenched their hearts as those whom they loved fought each other. Running to the field with their hair loose and clothes torn, they stood between the Romans and the Sabines, begging their men to stop the slaughtering. Their cheers and pleas struck each man's heart, and they laid their weapons down. The peace treaty joined the two people into one, with the Sabine king Tatius as Romulus's co-regent. The Ascension of Romulus. One day a thunderstorm broke out during a meeting of the Senate, and darkness fell, in the midst of which Romulus vanished. This started slanderous rumors that the senators killed him in the dark and secretly buried his body. But the same night, Romulus visited in a dream a man called Julius Proculus and told him that he was summoned to heaven, where he would reside among the immortals, and that he must be worshipped from then on by the Romans under the name of Coriolanus. Thus our city was given the divine protector who is worshipped on the Capitol, together with his father Mars and his grandfather Jupiter, the best and the greatest. The 7 Kings. The second king, Numa Pompilius, was a Sabine. He was a wise lawgiver and a friend of the nymph Egeria. who advised him on affairs of state. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, was the fourth. Ancus Marcius were fine rulers, one a great warrior and another a man of peace. The fifth, Tarquinius Priscus, came to Rome as an exile from Etruria, but when he entered Rome as an exile from yeah, we already read that. But when he entered, an eagle landed on his head and he was elected king. The sixth, Servius Tullius, was a servant in the royal household, and his virtues eventually gained him kingship. He built a new wall and was killed by his own son-in-law, who became a tyrant, known as Tarquinius Superbus. Tarquin the Proud. The tyranny of the Tarquins. Tarquinius Superbus was an evil man, but his son Sextus seemed even worse. He brought about the fall of the Tarquins. During the siege of Argaea, he started to taunt his relative Collatinus about the latter's wife, Lucretia. Angered, Collatinus set a wager among those who were present that this was the most virtuous of all their wives, and he proved right. When surprised by their sudden return, the wives of his friend were enjoying gossip and entertainment in the company of men, but Lucretia was found weaving at her loom, with only her female slaves in attendance. When Sextus Tarquinius saw her modesty and grace, he swore to himself that he would possess her. Lucretia's suicide. A few days later, Sextus Tarquinius returned in the absence of Lucretia's husband and tried to seduce Lucretia, protesting ardent love for her and promising her riches. Repulsed with indignation, he turned to threats and finally forced her to succumb. Upon the return of her husband, Lucretia told him and his closest friends of what happened, pleaded with them to avenge her honor, and then took her own life by stabbing herself. A wave of indignation shattered the Roman people. Under the leadership of Lucius Junius Brutus and Publius Valerius Poplicola, they revolted against the tyranny, expelled the Tarquins, and proclaimed the res publica. The Elder Brutus. The Elder Brutus was the founder of the Republic and their first consul. Brought up at the court of Tarquinius Superbus, in order to survive, he had to play a simpleton and a fool, but suffered watching the reign of injustice. The rape of Lucretia inflamed in him such a passionate hatred of tyranny that he led the popular revolt which overthrew the Tarquins. A great patriot, he defended the newborn freedom from the enemy without and within. When he learned that his own sons were in secret league with the Tarquins who plotted to return, Brutus presided over their trial and with no hesitation sentenced them to death, setting a tragic example of unswerving service to the Republic. Mucius Scaevola. The exiled Tarquins entreated the Etruscan king Porsenna to restore them in Rome. He agreed and laid siege to the city. The Romans greatly suffered from a shortage of food. The young Mucius penetrated the Etruscan camp intent on assassinating the king, but erroneously. Is that even how you write that? Killed an attendant whom he mistook for his master. When caught, he said that a group of Roman youths swore to murder Porsenna, and he was just the first to make an attempt. When the frightened king threatened him with torture, Mucius put his right hand in the altar's fire. Shaken by this feat of bravery, Porsenna lifted the siege, and Mucius received the surname Scaevolae, which means left-handed. I guess he wasn't left-handed before, but I guess now he was left-handed. So he was threatened with torture. Did he put his own hand in the altar's fire, or someone else put his hand in the altar fire? I don't even know. The story of Kolya. I mean, he did it himself, right? The story of Kolya. Although he lifted the siege of Rome, King Porsenna demanded to be given hostages, among them a number of noble young maidens. One of them, by the name of Kolya, anguished away from the city she loved, and under the cover of night escaped and crossed the Tiber on horseback. But the Romans, although they admired her escape, thought that to honor their word was more important, and sent her back to the Etruscans. It was King Porsenna himself who, in recognition of her spirit and valor, released Kolya from her pledge as hostage and allowed her to return home. Well, that was a nice story. Cirinatus. Sometimes men in the most humble of positions will find themselves summoned to the aid of the fatherland. So was the case with a farmer named Cirinatus. During a time of war with our neighbors, he was suddenly appointed dictator and took command of our legions. Although a humble man, he acted resolutely and defeated the enemy in 16 days. Thereupon, instead of enjoying the fame and authority in the city, he resigned from dictatorship, returned to his small farm, and continued to cultivate his land. That's another nice story. Coriolanus. Coriolanus was a proud patrician who quarreled with the popular tribunes and was exiled. He joined forces with Rome's enemies, hoping to make a return by force. When Coriolanus' army appeared at the city gates, many of his friends tried to dissuade him from the course of action he was embarked upon, but in vain. Then his mother and his wife hastened to meet him, and by appealing to the best in him in ways that no man could, they succeeded in making him change his mind. Coriolanus took his army away and was killed by his allies for what they saw as betrayal. So I guess they're not longer his allies. The Geese that saved Rome. I think that's the last one, yeah. I think I've already read this as well at a certain place in Rome that was lighting up. But we'll read it again, because I'm not sure. When the Republic was still young, the Gauls from the north crossed the Alps and poured into Italy. They defeated our army in battle and captured the city, which they burned, except for the fortress on the capital. They besieged it in order to force the garrison to surrender from starvation. But the brave defenders of that last post did not give up. Tired of waiting, the Gauls decided to surprise them at night. As the enemy climbed the hill, the sacred geese of Juno heard the movement and began to honk so loudly that Marcus Manlius awoke as the first Gaul reached the top of the wall, and he cut him down. The others followed Manlius's lead, and Rome was saved. Right, we'll read about the temples now. There's like quite a bunch. I should have already read this one as well, as like one of the first things I've read. But I could try it again. I'm probably getting a little bit better at reading. When the Republic was established, the senators met in the Curia Hostilia and decided how Rome should be governed. The domestic order was threatened, however, by the conflict between the patricians who dominated the political scene and the low-born plebeians who sought access to public offices from which they had been barred. I don't know. Sounds like a very long sentence. After many decades of this inner strife, the dictator Camillus asked the goddess Concordia to interfere and help restore the peace. With her guidance, he persuaded the patricians to concede the plebeians their legitimate demands. Thereupon, the grateful Camillus built a temple to honor the goddess of Concord, the Temple of Concord. The renewed turmoil. Centuries after Camillus' civil strife resumed, when Tiberius Gracchus proposed an agrarian bill to redistribute land in favor of the poor, and he was killed at the forum by his opponents. 10 years later, the same doom visited his brother Gaius, the staunch champion of the common people, and the consul Optimius, responsible for the murder of Gaius Gracchus and the massacre of hundreds of his supporters. As if imitating the noble Camillus, decided hypocritically to rededicate the Temple of Concord. The same night, however, an anonymous hand wrote on the temple's wall, "This Temple of Concord is the work of Mad Concord," and the events that followed made clear this was true. I understood nothing there. The Temple of Antoninus and Faustina. Not all temples in the Forum honor the gods who give us life and bless us with the tools needed to live it well. The newest temple honors the Emperor Antoninus Pius and his beloved wife, Faustina the Elder. The gods favored him, for while he ruled Rome, the emperor enjoyed peace for 22 years. So great was Antoninus' grief when Faustina died that he declared his wife a goddess and built this temple to her. Nobody could find fault with this decision. He was not evil like the mad Caligula, who declared himself a god, but he gave Rome what she longed for, peace. Curia. Set amidst the luxuriously ornamented temples and opposite the beautiful Basilica, Julia is the sparsely adorned Senate house. Our founder, Romulus, met with his advisors in groves under the watchful eyes of the gods, and the city grew. So did the need for an official place to discuss and vote on issues. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, erected the original Curia, which was enlarged by the dictator Sulla into 2 buildings. Sulla also added the verse decorative accents, a Greek mural. Today the Curia is made of marble with little decoration inside. There are benches to sit on and a chair for the presiding officer. The Basilica Julia. The dictator Julius Caesar began constructing what has become the most popular meeting place in Rome. It stands directly across from the earlier Basilica Aemilia. Augustus, Caesar's successor, completed the basilica that bears the signs of his fine taste in marble, colonnades, and finely tiled floors. Aside from serving as a meeting place, here is where the laws of the empire are tested and enforced. Large heavy curtains separate each tribunal from the great enclosed space. There is even a tribunal in the upper gallery. I think I read that as well. The Rostra. To commemorate Rome's first naval victory in the wars with Carthage, the commanders took off the prows from the enemy ships, which looked like the beaks of the birds and are called rostra, and secured them onto the speaker's platform at the forum. Over the centuries, many great leaders and orators climbed those steps to address the Roman people. Septimius Severus has been rearranging the rostra so that speakers can go to the platform directly from the triumphal arch he recently built. There is a doorway on the north side of the rostra which leads to the Cuniculi tunnels which lie under the forum. I have heard stories that a Vestal Virgin cannot repeat. ... The Palatine Hill. The imperial palace sits atop the hill just south of the forum on which Romulus was told by the gods to found our eternal city. From here all of Rome and the roads leading to it may be seen. It was Augustus who first built on the Palatine a modest residence which was many times surpassed, both in size and luxury, by those of his successors. I live within the shadow of this hill, one of the 7 that surround the forum. Amazingly, the aqueducts are high enough to bring water to a large reservoir at the top of the Palatine. This ensures excellent water pressure and great convenience at all forum and Palatine locations that tap into it. Of course, we virgins carry all water by hand. We carry all our water by hand. The Arch of Severus. Severus, our emperor, built this arch to honor his military victories in the east, to show his love for his sons, and their love for each other. What wishful thinking! He carved their names into the keystone for all to see. It is his most public plea for familial peace. In fact, his son Caracalla and Geta constantly fight amongst themselves. A popular joke says that had they been twins, he would have named them Romulus and Remus. Although their names appear side by side, I have yet to see the two imperial brats act as brothers. Definitely have read that before. Like right at the beginning. Julius Caesar's funeral. After Julius Caesar was murdered, his assassins didn't even want to allow him stately burial. Had Marcus Antonius failed to speak so eloquently, they would have succeeded. His words roused the people, who placed Caesar's body on a bier and carried it through the Forum, so to the Temple of Jupiter, but were not allowed to enter by the priests. Then Julius Caesar's body was taken by the crowd back to the Forum and placed near the Regia. Since they could not build a proper funeral pyre, they raided the house of a magistrate and used his furniture and wooden statues for the fire. The blaze of the pyre lit the Forum from end to end. The Temple of the deified Julius, placed on the very spot of Caesar's funeral pyre, it is as magnificent as any building erected under Augustus. After Julius Caesar died, a comet crossed the sky during both the day and night of the secular games. Augustus, who was at the time still a very young man called Octavian, contrived that the comet was recognized as the sign of his adoptive father becoming a god. When he attained supreme power, Augustus built this temple in Julius Caesar's honor and filled the rooms with Egyptian treasures. Outside the temple, a statue of the deified dictator stands with a star on his forehead to remind Rome of the comet that burned in the sky. The Temple of Jupiter, founded by the fifth king, Tarquinius Priscus, the Temple of Jupiter, the best and greatest, stands outside the Forum on the Palatine Hill. Here is where we honor the Father and ruler of gods, the one who makes all things possible. Victorious generals in the past and later the emperors are required by custom to give thanks and offer Jupiter a division of the spoils at the end of their triumphal march through the city. The consuls make sacrifices to him after being elected to office. Domitian rebuilt this temple, adding to it gold-plated doors, columns of Pentelic marble, and a roof with bronze tiles. The Temple of Saturn. Before the standard of weights and measures were moved to the Temple of Castor and Pollux, we kept them under the watchful eye of Saturn. It is this great god who takes care of our flocks and keeps our crops free from blight and pestilence. In the Golden Age, Saturn came among the people and taught them how to form and herd. When they knew enough, he left them. The first temple. To thank the god and remain in his favor, the people built a crude table as the first altar to Saturn, the father of Jupiter, and later they erected a temple to honor him. It is to this building that architects look, for it shows how temples should be designed, set against a hill, raised off the ground, and approached by a series of steps that are odd in number. This is so that the priest can start and end his climb to the temple floor with his right foot. Augustus rebuilt the temple in marble after Rome burned. The Temple of Castor and Pollux. This temple honors the divine twins who appeared astride their beautiful white horses within the Roman ranks during the battle at Lake Regillus in the earliest days of the Republic and secured our victory over the Latins. It's a long sentence. It was the mad Caligula who, centuries later, desecrated this sanctuary by the demand that the twin protectors of our city became the guards of his own residence. He ordered that the glorious marble temple be attached to the imperial palace and function as a vestibule. In his wisdom, Claudius restored the temple to its rightful place as a sacred edifice. The Temple of Vespasian. When Titus assumed the purple, he honored his father Vespasian's victories in Palestine with this magnificent temple. The day of his triumphal return to Rome will never be forgotten. Gold, silver, fine cloth, ivory, and amphorae of fine fragrances filled hundreds of chariots. The citizens dressed in their best and brightest robes as they followed the ceremonial chariot to the Temple of Jupiter. It is said the path looked like a river of Egyptian dyes. The frieze on this temple depicts the moments of the traditional ritual. An image of a priest using a pitcher to pour libations and an axe to kill sacrificial victims. I think I've read this before as well. The Regia. The Regia was the home of Rome's kings, and during the Republic, the residence of the Pontifex Maximus, head of our religion. One room is still used as his office. Another contains the sacred shields of Mars, god of war. The head of the winning horse in the sacred October horse races is nailed to the wall here, and the blood of the tail is allowed to drip on the hearth. Along one side of the building is a pentagonal courtyard under which are two deep wells and a large beehive-shaped cistern for grain storage. These are sealed with strange concentric capstones which can be rotated. Inscriptions on the Regia walls describe the military achievements of her legions. The Tullianum. The most feared building in the empire stands on the slope of the Capitol. Here, in one of two cold, dark cells, criminals and traitors spend their last days. They hope for a quick strangulation or hanging. All too often, their bodies are tortured or they are left in the lower cell to starve. Some prisoners have asked for Vestal virgins to intercede on their behalf, but once they are sentenced to death, even Vestals can do nothing. At best, we can hope that they will be placed in the upper cell. It is somewhat better lit and warmer than the lower one. The Condemned. Many powerful men have died in the Tullianum and had their bodies thrown down the stair of size. Among them were outside foes such as the Numidian king Jagartha and the leader of the Gauls, Vercingetorix, captured by Julius Caesar, and also our compatriots declared enemies of the people. Thus the accomplices of Catiline, who plotted to overthrow the government in the days of Cicero, were given over to the executioner, who strangled them one by one. The corpse of Sejanus, a traitorous minister to Emperor Tiberius, was left at the base of the stairs for 3 days, and the whole processions of lesser notables during the times of terror died in this dark place. The Temple of Vesta. Empress Julia Domna has renovated the temple honoring Vesta. Here the fire of Vesta burns continuously throughout the year, except in Martius, when it is ceremoniously doused and then relit. As recently as under Commodus, the temple and the house where we live suffered from a fire, and not only were all the Vestals forced to flee, but in haste the Palladium was left uncovered and seen by others, a shame that had not occurred for many centuries. How many more things are there? The house of the Vestals, our official residence, was much damaged by the same fire, but was promptly restored on the orders of Emperor Severus. Statues of the greatest Vestals stand inside these walls, watching over their chosen followers. These have all been removed for cleaning and repairs, and should be reinstalled on their bases next year. Although much of today's house of the Vestals is recent, we still do not have pipes to bring water into our home. It is forbidden by the goddess that we store water, which is why we must fill our jars with water each day from the sacred springs of wisdom. These pointed jars will not stand up, a reminder not to let the sacred water touch the ground. The fires. Our city is always vulnerable to the threat of fire, and both the temple and the house burned many times. But in each case, measures were properly taken to protect the holy objects kept in the Penet Ralia. When the Gauls entered the city walls and laid siege to the capital, the Vestals and the Flamens removed the holy objects from the Gauls' reach. Some of the objects were buried in a cellar, others were taken by the Vestals as they exited the city. They were careful not to extinguish Vesta's sacred fire, which they also carried with them. The Penet Ralia. The earthen jar that contains the sacred Palladium statue is kept in the Penet Ralia, a secure room within the house of the Vestals. No man except the Pontifex Maximus is allowed to enter the Penet Ralia, and even we Vestals can enter it only once a year, during the festival of Vestalia. According to our tradition, there was only one occasion, long ago in the time of the early Republic, when this rule was broken at a moment of utmost danger, a man called Metellus saved the Palladium from the fire. He lost his right arm and sight, but was rewarded for his brave act with the highest possible honors. Whenever he attended meetings at the Curia, he was honored by being driven in a chariot. Right, we actually made it. So I guess that should be it for today. Lots of reading. Next day, we're just gonna read some more checks, advance the time, and continue. We also just read about this thingy here. This arch. It's supposed to be like a passageway as well for isn't there like a door? Who knows? Well, anyway, I think we've done enough today. So, goodbye.